The morning of May 6, 2023, began with an unusual quietness in London. Catherine, Princess of Wales, woke up earlier than usual in her apartment at Kensington Palace. The spring sunlight filtered through the curtains as she lay still for a moment, thinking about the monumental day ahead. Today, her father-in-law would be crowned King of the United Kingdom, and she would play a significant role in one of the most important ceremonies in British history. She had been preparing for this day for months, yet the reality of it felt surreal. Catherine got out of bed carefully, not wanting to disturb William, who was still sleeping beside her. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain slightly, looking out at the gardens below. Everything seemed peaceful, but she knew that beyond the palace walls, thousands of people were already gathering along the procession route, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal family. Her children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, would also be part of the ceremony. George, as second in line to the throne, had a special role to play. Catherine had spent weeks helping him understand what would happen and making sure he felt comfortable with his responsibilities. She had watched him grow so much in the past year, becoming more confident and aware of his future role. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was her dresser, arriving to begin the long process of getting ready. Catherine smiled and welcomed her in. The outfit she would wear had been chosen months ago, after countless discussions and fittings. Every detail had been considered, from the color to the accessories, because she knew the world would be watching. The dress was a work of art, designed by Alexander McQueen, the same fashion house that had created her wedding dress 12 years earlier. It was an ivory silk crepe gown with intricate embroidery. The embroidery featured rose, thistle, daffodil, and shamrock motifs, representing the 4 nations of the United Kingdom. Silver bullion and threadwork caught the light beautifully, creating a subtle shimmer that would be perfect for the grandeur of Westminster Abbey. But what truly made Catherine's outfit special was the red and blue elements. She wore a crimson velvet robe with elaborate gold embroidery, a ceremonial piece that spoke to the formality and tradition of the occasion. The robe was designed by Jess Collett and Alexander McQueen, featuring rich symbolism throughout its design. Catherine had learned about every symbol, every thread, understanding that what she wore was more than fashion. It was history. As her dresser began working on her hair, Catherine thought about the tiara she would wear. The choice of headpiece had been carefully considered. She would wear a floral tiara that belonged to Queen Elizabeth, a piece loaded with meaning and memory. It was a way to honor the late queen, who had passed away just 8 months earlier. Catherine had been very close to her grandmother-in-law. Wearing her tiara, it felt like bringing a piece of her presence to the coronation. The tiara was made of diamonds set in a delicate floral design. It sparkled with an elegance that complemented Catherine's natural grace. She had worn it before on several occasions, but today it felt different. Today it carried the weight of continuity, linking the past to the present and the future. William woke up and watched his wife getting ready. He came over and placed his hand on her shoulder, looking at her reflection in the mirror. They exchanged a knowing glance. No words were needed. They both understood the significance of the day and the responsibilities they carried, not just as individuals, but as a team. Their children came into the room one by one. George looked smart in his formal attire, though Catherine could see the nervousness in his eyes. She knelt down beside him, careful not to disturb her partially completed hair and makeup, and spoke to him softly. She reminded him that she and his father would be nearby throughout the ceremony. She told him how proud they were of him and how well he would do. Charlotte appeared next, looking adorable in her own carefully chosen outfit. She had a natural confidence that sometimes surprised Catherine. The young princess seemed to understand instinctively how to behave in public, often helping her younger brother Louis navigate formal situations. Today would be no different. Louis the youngest bounded in with his usual energy. At 5 years old, he was still learning about royal protocol, and Catherine knew he might find the long ceremony challenging. She had prepared small strategies to help him stay focused, and she trusted that between her, William, and other family members, they would manage whatever came up. The makeup artist worked carefully on Catherine's face, creating a look that was elegant but natural. Catherine had always preferred subtle makeup, even for the most formal occasions. She wanted to look like herself, just an enhanced version. The artist applied soft pink tones to her cheeks and a classic red lip that complemented her crimson. Robed perfectly as the final touches were made to her hair, styled in an elegant updo that would properly support the tiara. Catherine stood and looked at herself in the full-length mirror. The transformation was complete. She looked regal, dignified, and ready for the historic day ahead. The ivory gown flowed beautifully. The crimson robe added gravitas, and the tiara caught the light with every slight movement of her head. Her private secretary came to inform them that it was almost time to leave for Westminster Abbey. The children were gathered together. Last-minute adjustments made to everyone's outfits. Catherine took a deep breath and reached for William's hand. He squeezed it gently, and they shared a smile. The family made their way down the grand staircase of Kensington Palace. Staff members lined the hallway, offering words of encouragement and good wishes. Catherine thanked each one graciously. She had always made it a point to acknowledge the people who worked behind the scenes, understanding that their efforts made everything possible. Outside, the official cars were waiting. The morning had grown brighter, and Catherine could hear the distant sounds of crowds gathering. As they prepared to leave for the Abbey, she took one last look at her children, her husband, and thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a young girl in Berkshire to the Princess of Wales. Her life had been extraordinary, but she had never forgotten who she was at her core. The journey from Kensington Palace to Westminster Abbey was shorter than Catherine expected, though every minute felt significant. The official car moved slowly through the streets of London, giving the enormous crowds gathered along the route a chance to see the royal family. Catherine waved through the window, seeing people of all ages holding flags, cameras, and homemade signs. Some had clearly been waiting since the early morning hours, perhaps even overnight, just to be part of this historic day. Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude toward them. Their dedication reminded her why these ceremonies mattered, why tradition and continuity were important in a rapidly changing world. The monarchy represented something permanent, something that connected generations. George sat beside her, watching everything with wide eyes. Catherine noticed him observing how she waved and smiled at the crowds, and she saw him begin to do the same. It was a small moment of learning, but it represented something much larger. He was beginning to understand his role, not through formal instruction, but through lived experience. Watching and learning from those around him, Charlotte and Louis were in good spirits, pointing out interesting things they saw through the windows. Louis was particularly fascinated by the horses and ceremonial guards. Catherine answered their questions patiently, using the journey as an opportunity to teach them about the history and significance of what they were experiencing. As the car approached Westminster Abbey, the atmosphere changed. The crowds grew denser, the security more visible, and the grandeur more apparent. The Abbey itself stood magnificent against the London skyline, its Gothic architecture a testament to centuries of British history. Coronations had taken place here since 1066, and today would add another chapter to that ancient story. The car slowed to a stop at the designated entrance. Catherine could see other vehicles arriving with members of the royal family and distinguished guests from around the world. This was truly a global event, the representatives from nearly every nation present to witness Charles's coronation before stepping out. Catherine took a moment to check on her children one final time. She adjusted George's collar slightly, smoothed Charlotte's hair, and gave Louis an encouraging smile. William caught her eye and nodded. They were ready. The door opened. Catherine stepped out onto the red carpet that led into the Abbey. The sound of the crowds intensified immediately. A wave of cheers and applause that was almost overwhelming. She maintained her composure, smiling warmly as photographers captured every angle. Her crimson robe flowed behind her gracefully, the gold embroidery catching the light magnificently. The family walked together toward the entrance, with George showing remarkable poise for a 9-year-old boy. Catherine stayed close to her children, ready to offer support if needed, but they were doing wonderfully. The months of preparation were paying off. Inside the Abbey, the atmosphere was completely different. The ancient stone walls seemed to absorb sound, creating a space that felt sacred and solemn. Centuries of history were embedded in these walls, and Catherine felt the weight of that history as she walked down the aisle. The abbey had been decorated beautifully for the occasion, with flowers and banners adding color to the stone interior. Thousands of guests were already seated. A mix of royalty, politicians, religious leaders, military personnel, and representatives from various Commonwealth nations and charities. As Catherine and her family made their way to their designated seats, she recognized many faces. Some were close friends. Others were dignitaries she had met at various official functions over the years. She took her seat in the front section, with William beside her and their children nearby. From this vantage point, she had a perfect view of where Charles would be crowned. The coronation chair, dating back to 1296, sat waiting for the king. The stone of Scone, an ancient symbol of Scottish monarchy, was positioned beneath it. Returned to Scotland in recent years, but brought back for this special occasion. The abbey gradually filled with more guests, and the air buzzed with quiet anticipation. Catherine used this time to observe the details around her, the religious artifacts, the ceremonial objects that would be used during the service, the magnificent organ that would fill the space with music. Everything had been planned with meticulous care. She thought about Camilla, who would be crowned queen consort alongside Charles. Catherine had developed a warm relationship with her over the years, and she admired the grace with which Camilla had navigated her complex position within the royal family. Today would be a triumph for her as well, recognition of her dedication and service. The music began, signaling that the ceremony was about to start. The congregation rose to their feet as the procession entered. Catherine watched as various members of the clergy, dressed in elaborate robes, made their way down the aisle. Religious leaders from different faiths were included in the ceremony, reflecting the diverse nature of modern Britain. Then came Charles and Camilla, walking with dignity and purpose. Catherine felt a surge of emotion seeing her father-in-law at this momentous occasion. Charles had waited his entire life for this day. He had been the Prince of Wales for longer than anyone in British history, serving with dedication and commitment to numerous causes. Now at 74 years old, he was finally taken his place as king. Charles looked every bit the monarch in his ceremonial robes. His face showed the gravity of the moment, but also a sense of purpose. This was what he had been preparing for throughout his entire life. Camilla walked beside him with elegance, her own outfit chosen to complement the occasion perfectly. As they took their positions, the ceremony officially began. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, led the proceedings with a voice that carried through the ancient abbey. The service combined religious tradition with elements that reflected contemporary Britain, including music from diverse cultures and readings in multiple languages. Catherine watched as Charles went through each stage of the coronation ritual. There was the recognition, where he was presented to the people gathered in the abbey, and they were asked if they accepted him as their king. Their response, a resounding affirmation, echoed through the building. Then came the oath, where Charles pledged to govern according to law and justice, to maintain the Protestant Reformed religion, and to uphold the rights and privileges of the Church of England. His voice was clear and steady as he made these solemn promises. The most sacred part of the ceremony was the anointing. For this, Charles removed his crimson robe and sat in the coronation chair. A canopy was held over him to shield this most holy moment from view, as the Archbishop anointed him with holy oil. This was the spiritual heart of the coronation, the moment that set a British monarch apart, signifying divine blessing and consecration to service. Catherine watched the anointing with deep reverence. Though she could not see the actual moment due to the canopy, she understood its profound significance. This ancient ritual connected Charles to every monarch who had come before him, a chain of succession stretching back through centuries. The holy oil used was a special blend made according to a secret recipe, containing oils from the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, giving it biblical significance. After the anointing, Charles was dressed in the supertunica, a golden robe that symbolized his new sacred status. Then came the presentation of the royal regalia, each item loaded with meaning. The spurs represented knighthood and chivalry. The sword of state symbolized his duty to protect his people, and the orb represented the Christian world under Christ's dominion. The moment everyone had been waiting for arrived when the archbishop lifted St. Edward's crown, this magnificent piece, made of solid gold and encrusted with precious stones. Had crowned monarchs since 1661, it weighed nearly 5 pounds, a literal and symbolic weight of kingship. The abbey fell completely silent as the archbishop carefully placed the crown on Charles's head. At that exact moment, the congregation called out in unison, "God save the king." The words reverberated through the abbey and outside. Bells rang out across London and throughout the United Kingdom. Gun salutes thundered in various locations. Catherine felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Despite having been born into a regular family and marrying into royalty, she never took these moments for granted. This was history unfolding before her eyes. George, sitting beside her, watched everything with intense concentration. Catherine knew this was especially significant for him. One day, far in the future, he would sit in that same chair, wear that same crown, and take those same oaths. She glanced at her son and saw not just a child but the future of the monarchy. It was both beautiful and sobering. After Charles was crowned, attention turned to Camilla. She was led to a separate throne where she would be crowned queen consort. The ceremony for Camilla was adapted from tradition, reflecting her unique position. She was crowned with Queen Mary's crown, which had been specially modified for the occasion. The crown had been altered to include the Cullinan 3, 4, and V diamonds, creating a spectacular display as the archbishop placed the crown on Camilla's head. Catherine felt genuine happiness for her. Camilla had faced enormous challenges over the years, enduring intense public scrutiny and criticism. Yet she had persevered with dignity, carving out her own role within the royal family and proving her commitment to service. This crowning was recognition of her journey and her dedication. The religious service continued with prayers, blessings, and hymns. The music was extraordinary, performed by some of the finest musicians in Britain. The choir's voices soared through the abbey, creating an atmosphere that was both celebratory and deeply spiritual. Catherine had always loved church music. This was church music at its most magnificent. Throughout the ceremony, Catherine was aware of the cameras. She knew that every expression, every gesture, every moment was being watched by millions of people around the world. This was not a burden to her anymore. In the years since marrying William, she had learned how to maintain grace under constant observation while still being authentic. She knew when to look solemn, when to smile, and how to show appropriate emotion without being overly dramatic. Louis, predictably, started to get a bit restless about halfway through the ceremony. He was only 5 years old, and even with the best preparation, sitting still for hours in a formal setting was challenging for a young child. Catherine noticed him beginning to fidget and caught his attention with a gentle look. She leaned over slightly and whispered something to him that made him smile. It was a brief moment of motherly connection amid the grandeur of the state occasion. Charlotte, ever the reliable middle child, was doing beautifully. She sat with perfect posture, watched the proceedings with genuine interest, and occasionally helped keep Louis engaged when Catherine was unable to give him direct attention. Catherine felt proud of all her children, but was particularly impressed with Charlotte's natural poise. The ceremony progressed to the homage, where various representatives pledged their loyalty to the new king. In a break from tradition, rather than having all peers of the realm individually pledge allegiance, a more streamlined approach was used. William, as Prince of Wales and heir apparent, was the primary person to give homage, representing the entire nation. Catherine watched her husband kneel before his father. William placed his hands between Charles's hands and spoke the words of the oath clearly and firmly. He pledged to become his father's liege man of life and limb, and to live and die against all manner of folks. It was a medieval oath, but spoken with contemporary sincerity. As William leaned forward to kiss his father's cheek, Catherine saw Charles's eyes glisten with emotion. It was a powerful moment of connection between father and son. Between one generation of monarchy and the next, the ceremony also included an innovation where people watching around the country and Commonwealth were invited to join in a homage of the people, a modern way of allowing broader participation in this ancient ritual. It was one of several ways the coronation balanced tradition with contemporary relevance. After the homage was Holy Communion, and then the service began to move toward its conclusion. The final prayers were said, asking for God's blessing on the new king and queen, on the royal family, and on the nation. The choir sang the national anthem, and the entire congregation joined in with full voice. "God Save the King" echoed through Westminster Abbey with tremendous power and emotion as the recessional began. Charles and Camilla, now fully crowned and robed in their regalia, processed out of the abbey. They moved slowly, allowing everyone present to see them in their full majesty. The weight of the crown and robes was considerable, but Charles carried himself with dignity and strength. Camilla, too, moved with grace, her own crown glittering in the light. Catherine and her family followed in the procession, walking out of the abbey behind other senior members of the royal family. The contrast between the quiet, sacred atmosphere inside the abbey and what awaited outside was striking. As soon as they emerged from the abbey doors, the sound hit them like a wave. Thousands upon thousands of people were gathered, cheering and waving flags. The energy was electric. The coronation procession back to Buckingham Palace would take them through the streets of London, giving the public a chance to celebrate with the newly crowned king and queen. This was different from the arrival procession. Now Charles wore the imperial state crown. Both he and Camilla were in their full coronation regalia, traveling in the magnificent gold state coach. Catherine and her family traveled in a separate carriage behind the gold state coach carrying Charles and Camilla. The procession moved through central London along a carefully planned route that allowed maximum public viewing. The streets were lined with people as far as Catherine could see, with many waving Union flags, others holding banners welcoming the new king. The atmosphere was jubilant. Despite rain forecasts that had worried organizers, the weather had held beautifully. Sunshine broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the proceedings. Catherine saw people perched on lampposts, hanging out of windows, and crowded onto every available vantage point. The diversity of the crowd struck her, people of all ages, backgrounds, and nationalities coming together to witness history. As their carriage passed, the crowds cheered enthusiastically. Catherine waved continuously, making eye contact with as many people as possible. She had learned over the years that these small acknowledgments meant everything to the people who had waited hours to be there. A wave, a smile, a moment of eye contact created a connection that people would remember and treasure. George sat across from her, and she could see him processing everything. This was probably the largest crowd he had ever seen, and the noise was incredible. Yet he maintained his composure, waving to the crowds just as his parents did. Catherine felt immense pride watching him. He was learning what it meant to be royal, not through textbooks or lectures, but through experience. Charlotte was clearly enjoying herself, delighted by the spectacle and the crowd's enthusiasm. She waved energetically, her face lit up with genuine joy. Louis was more interested in the horses pulling the carriage and the ceremonial guards riding alongside. He pressed his face to the window, trying to see everything at once. Catherine and William exchanged, amused glances at their youngest son's wonder. The procession passed many of London's most iconic landmarks. They went through Parliament Square, where the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben stood as symbols of British democracy. The juxtaposition was intentional, the coronation procession passing the seat of elected government. Showing how monarchy and democracy coexisted in the British system, they continued along Whitehall, passing government buildings and memorials to Britain's war dead. The cenotaph stood solemn amid the celebration, a reminder of sacrifice and duty. The military presence along the route was significant, with thousands of service personnel from across the armed forces participating in the procession. Their precision and discipline were impressive, their uniforms adding brilliant color to the scene. As they approached Trafalgar Square, the crowds grew even denser. This famous plaza, with Nelson's column at its center, was packed with people. The noise level increased noticeably, and Catherine could feel the energy and excitement radiating from the crowd. Some people threw flowers toward the carriages, while others simply cheered and waved. The procession turned onto the Mall, the grand avenue leading to Buckingham Palace. This stretch was particularly spectacular. The Mall had been decorated elaborately for the coronation, with Union flags and royal standards lining both sides. The trees were in full spring bloom, adding natural beauty to the ceremonial splendor. the Victoria Memorial came into view, and beyond it, Buckingham Palace, its facade decorated with bunting and banners. As they approached the palace gates, Catherine could see enormous crowds gathered in front of the building and spreading throughout. St. James's Park. These people would wait for hours more, hoping to see the newly crowned king and queen appear on the famous balcony. It was a tradition dating back generations. Catherine knew how meaningful that balcony appearance would be. The carriages passed through the palace gates and into the inner courtyard. Here, away from the public crowds, there was a moment of relative quiet. Staff members waited to assist them from the carriages. Catherine stepped down carefully, mindful of her long dress and the crimson robe. She helped her children exit safely, making sure everyone was ready before they proceeded inside Buckingham Palace. The atmosphere was different again. While crowds celebrated outside, inside, there was a sense of relief, mixed with continued formality. The coronation ceremony had gone beautifully, without any mishaps. Charles and Camilla had carried themselves perfectly. The children had behaved wonderfully. Now came the next phase of the day. The balcony appearance and the FLYPAST. Catherine was taken to a private room where her outfit could be adjusted and freshened after the journey. Her hair remained perfectly in place, the tiara secured despite the movement of the carriage ride. The makeup artist did quick touch-ups, ensuring she looked camera-ready for the photographs and the balcony appearance that would be broadcast worldwide. She could hear the roar of the crowds outside, even from inside the palace. The sound was constant, a low rumble punctuated by periodic surges of louder cheering. She knew the people outside would be getting restless, eager to see their new king and queen. Eager for the traditional balcony appearance, William found her in the preparation room, and they had a brief moment together. He looked relieved that the ceremony was over, but also energized by the success of it all. They discussed how well the children had done and made sure they were ready for the balcony appearance. This would be brief but important. First time the public would see the newly crowned king and queen since the ceremony. George came in, looking slightly overwhelmed by everything. Catherine knelt down to his level and spoke to him about what would happen next. She explained that they would go out onto the balcony, that there would be many people below who would cheer and wave, and that they would wave back. She told him the Royal Air Force would fly past, and he should watch the sky for the planes. This detail caught his interest immediately, and his face brightened. The family was assembled in the proper order for the balcony appearance. Palace officials ensured everyone was positioned correctly as the formation on the balcony was carefully planned. Charles and Camilla would be in the center, with William and Catherine and their children nearby. Other working members of the royal family would also appear, but the focus would be on the new king and queen. The massive doors leading to the balcony were opened, and suddenly the noise from outside flooded in. It was an incredible sound, thousands of voices united in celebration. Charles and Camilla stepped out first, and the volume of the cheering increased dramatically. They waved to the crowds below, and cameras captured every moment. Catherine and William followed with their children. The sight that greeted them was breathtaking. The mall stretched out before them, a sea of people extending as far as the eye could see. Union flags waved everywhere, creating a moving tapestry of red, white, and blue. The crowd's enthusiasm was infectious. Catherine found herself genuinely moved by the display of support and celebration. She waved to the crowds, her crimson robe catching the breeze slightly, the tiara on her head catching the afternoon sunlight. Beside her, William waved as well, and their children joined in. George stood between his parents, looking somewhat serious as he waved. Charlotte was more animated, clearly delighted by the massive crowd. Louis waved enthusiastically, and at one point covered his ears when the noise became particularly loud, a gesture that would later become one of the most shared images from the day. The Royal Air Force flypast was scheduled to be the dramatic finale to the balcony appearance. Catherine kept one eye on the sky, watching for the first signs of the approaching aircraft. George was particularly excited about this part, having been told about it during the preparation. He craned his neck, scanning the clouds for any movement. The sound reached them before the planes became visible, a distant rumble that grew steadily louder. Then, emerging from the clouds in perfect formation, came the aircraft. The crowd's cheering intensified to an almost deafening level. Leading the formation were historic planes, including a Lancaster bomber, Spitfires, and Hurricanes, representing the Royal Air Force's distinguished history and honoring the courage of past generations. Modern military aircraft followed, showcasing the current strength and capability of Britain's armed forces. Jets streamed across the sky, their contrails creating white lines against the blue. The precision of the formation was remarkable. Each aircraft positioned exactly where it should be, moving as one coordinated unit. The finale was the Red Arrows, the Royal Air Force aerobatic team trailing red, white, and blue smoke across the London sky. They flew in a tight diamond formation, their colored smoke creating a spectacular display directly over Buckingham Palace. It was a perfect moment, combining military precision with artistic beauty. The crowd erupted in cheers. Catherine saw a genuine delight on the faces of her children. Louis pointed excitedly at the planes, his earlier tiredness forgotten in the excitement of the moment. George watched with serious interest, absorbing every detail. Charlotte clapped her hands together in delight. These were the moments Catherine treasured. Seeing her children experience something extraordinary, something that would become a core memory for them. Charles raised his hand in salute to the aircraft, a gesture of respect to the armed forces who serve the crown. It was a poignant moment. The newly crowned king acknowledging the military personnel who had participated in the day's celebrations and who served the nation every day. Camilla stood beside him, her crown glittering in the sunlight, looking every bit the queen after the flypast concluded. The royal family waved to the crowds one final time before retreating back into the palace. The doors closed behind them, and suddenly the noise dimmed. The contrast was striking, going from the roar of thousands to the relative quiet of the palace interior in just seconds. Inside, there was a palpable sense of accomplishment and relief. The public ceremonies were complete. Everything had gone according to plan, and the day had been a tremendous success. Palace staff offered congratulations, and there were smiles all around. Charles removed the imperial state crown. Clearly relieved to be free of its weight after wearing it for so long, Catherine took off her own tiara, feeling the relief of having the weight removed from her head. She had worn it for hours, and while it was beautiful, it was also heavy and required careful balance to keep secure. Her hair had been pulled so tightly to accommodate the tiara that her scalp was slightly sore. Small discomforts were part of these grand occasions. Prices willingly paid for the privilege of participating in history. The children were released from their formal duties. Though they remained in their ceremonial clothing for now, Louis immediately became more energetic, his personality emerging now that he no longer had to maintain strict decorum. Charlotte started chattering about everything she had seen, full of observations and questions. George remained more reserved, still processing the enormity of what he had experienced. There would be an official coronation banquet later that evening, a more intimate affair compared to the public ceremonies. This would give family members and close associates a chance to celebrate together, away from cameras and crowds. But before that, there was time to rest and reflect on the remarkable day. Catherine found a quiet corner and sat down, finally able to relax for a moment. She thought about everything that had happened. The ceremony had been magnificent, a perfect blend of ancient tradition and contemporary relevance. Seeing Charles crowned had been emotional. Watching a man who had dedicated his entire life to preparation finally assume the role he was born for, she thought about her own role in the day. She had paid tribute to the Wales family. The title she now carried as Princess of Wales through her choice of outfit and accessories. The floral motifs on her dress represented the unity of the United Kingdom. The crimson robe spoke to the grandeur and formality of the occasion. The tiara, borrowed from the late Queen Elizabeth, honored the past while celebrating the present. Catherine had learned over the years that in the royal family, everything communicated something. Clothing choices, jewelry selections, even small gestures carried meaning. People analyzed every detail, looking for significance and symbolism. She had become adept at using these tools of communication, making deliberate choices that sent appropriate messages while still feeling authentic to who she was. William joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. He sat down beside her and they shared a comfortable silence. They did not need to speak to communicate. They had been through so much together over their years of marriage. Navigating the challenges and privileges of royal life as a team, today had been another milestone in their shared journey. Their partnership had become one of the great strengths of the modern royal family. Catherine brought a perspective from outside traditional royal circles, having grown up in a middle-class family. William brought his understanding of royal duty and expectations, having been raised in the system. Together, they balanced each other, creating an approach that honored tradition while remaining relevant to contemporary Britain. As they sat together, palace staff came and went, continuing preparations for the evening's banquet. The coronation had been a massive undertaking involving thousands of people. From the clergy who conducted the ceremony to the military personnel who participated in the processions. From the palace staff, who organized logistics, to the security forces who kept everyone safe. From the musicians who provided beautiful music to the designers who created the magnificent outfits, countless individuals had contributed their skills and dedication to make the day successful. Catherine made a mental note to personally thank as many of these people as possible. She had always believed in acknowledging those who worked behind the scenes, understanding that their efforts were essential even if they never received public recognition. It was one of the lessons she had learned from Queen Elizabeth, who had been unfailingly gracious to everyone. Regardless of their position or role, the afternoon progressed, and preparations began for the evening banquet. This would be a more formal affair, with a seated dinner for family members, close friends, and key figures who had played important roles in Charles's life and reign. The guest list was carefully curated, limited to those who had genuine personal connections to the king and queen. Catherine would need to change into evening attire appropriate for the banquet. The crimson robe and tiara had been perfect for the public ceremonies, but something different would be suitable for the evening event. She had already selected her outfit, working with her team to ensure it struck the right balance between formal and festive. The evening banquet was held in one of Buckingham Palace's grandest staterooms. The space had been transformed for the occasion with elaborate floral arrangements, candlelight, and place settings of the finest china and crystal. Everything gleamed under the chandeliers. Creating an atmosphere of refined elegance, Catherine had changed into an evening gown, though she kept some continuity with her daytime look by maintaining sophisticated styling and choosing colors that complemented the red theme she had established earlier. Her hair was restyled, still elegant but softer now, more suited to an evening celebration than a state ceremony. She wore different jewelry, pieces that sparkled beautifully in the candlelight. The guests began arriving, and the atmosphere was noticeably more relaxed than the formal ceremony had been. People could actually converse freely, share observations about the day, and celebrate in a more personal way. There was laughter, animated conversation, and a genuine sense of joy permeating the room. Charles and Camilla entered to applause from the assembled guests. Both had changed from their ceremonial robes into formal evening wear, but they still wore their crowns for this official banquet. They looked happy, relieved, and energized by the success of the day. Charles in particular seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The seating arrangement at the banquet had been carefully planned. Catherine was seated near Charles and Camilla, along with William and other close family members. The position reflected her status as Princess of Wales and the wife of the heir apparent. She would be expected to engage in conversation with various guests, helping to ensure the evening flowed smoothly. Before the meal began, Charles stood to make a speech. The room fell silent, all eyes on the newly crowned king. He spoke with emotion about the significance of the day, thanking everyone who had made the coronation possible. He expressed gratitude to his family, particularly to William and Catherine, acknowledging their support and the important role they would play in the monarchy's future. He spoke about his mother, Queen Elizabeth, whose passing had brought him to the throne. His voice caught slightly as he remembered her decades of dedicated service. He pledged to follow her example, to serve with humility and dedication, to be a king for all people, regardless of their background or beliefs. It was a heartfelt speech that reflected Charles's deep sense of duty and his understanding. The responsibilities he had assumed, Camilla also spoke briefly, thanking people for their kindness and support over the years. She had faced considerable challenges in her journey to becoming queen, and her words reflected an appreciation for those who had stood by her. She spoke about her commitment to her charitable work and her determination to use her position to make a positive difference. The meal that followed was exquisite, featuring the finest British ingredients prepared by the palace's exceptional culinary team. Each course was a work of art, beautifully presented and delicious. The wine selection had been carefully chosen to complement the food, with some bottles coming from the royal cellars where they had aged for decades. Catherine engaged in conversation with those around her, discussing the day's events, sharing observations, and listening to perspectives from people who had participated in various aspects of the coronation. She spoke with clergy members who had been part of the ceremony, military officers who had led different contingents, and representatives from Commonwealth nations who had traveled to London for the occasion. She was particularly interested in hearing from people who had witnessed previous coronations and could compare this one to past events. Some guests had attended Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953, and their stories provided fascinating historical context. The evolution of the ceremony over decades, the changes in technology and media coverage, and the shifts in public expectations all created interesting points of discussion. As the evening progressed, there were toasts to the new king and queen, to the continued success of the monarchy, and to the unity of the United Kingdom and Commonwealth. The atmosphere was celebratory but also thoughtful, recognizing both the joy of the occasion and the serious responsibilities that came with it. Catherine observed how Charles interacted with guests throughout the evening. He moved from table to table, speaking personally with as many people as possible. He remembered details about individuals, asked thoughtful questions, and showed genuine interest in their lives and work. These were skills he had honed over decades of public service, and they served him well now as king. She also watched William, seeing how he navigated the evening with confidence and grace. He was no longer just the Duke of Cambridge, but the Prince of Wales, next in line to the throne after his father. The succession was clear, the future of the monarchy secure through multiple generations. It provided stability and continuity that was reassuring in an uncertain world. As midnight approached, the formal part of the evening began to wind down. Guests started to depart, offering final congratulations to Charles and Camilla. Catherine and William said their goodbyes to various people, thanking them for their participation in the historic day. The children had long since been taken upstairs to bed, exhausted but no doubt filled with memories of an extraordinary day. Tomorrow, the newspapers and media outlets would be filled with coverage of the coronation, analyzing every detail and sharing thousands of photographs. But tonight, the family could simply be together. Marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, Catherine and William walked through the palace corridors, toward their private quarters. The building was quiet now, the earlier excitement replaced by peaceful calm. Staff members were cleaning up from the day's events, but they worked quietly, respecting the late hour. In their private sitting room, Catherine finally removed her jewelry and let her hair down. The physical relief was immediate, but there was also an emotional release. The day had been perfect, but it had also been intense, requiring constant awareness and appropriate behavior. Now she could relax completely. William poured them each a drink, and they sat together on the sofa reviewing the day's events. They talked about the ceremony, the crowds, the children's behavior, and the various memorable moments. They laughed about Louis covering his ears during the loud cheering and smiled remembering George's serious concentration throughout the day. They discussed what the coronation meant for their own future. Charles's reign would hopefully last many years, but eventually the crown would pass to William, and Catherine would become queen consort. The thought was both distant and inevitable, something they prepared for even while hoping it remained far in the future. Catherine reflected on her own journey. From meeting William at university, through years of dating that played out under intense media scrutiny, to their wedding, to becoming parents, to taking on increasing royal responsibilities, and now to witnessing Charles's coronation. It had been an extraordinary path. She had grown and changed enormously, developing from a young woman uncertain of her place in royal life to a confident, capable Princess of Wales. The day had been a tribute not just to Charles, but to the institution of monarchy itself. The ceremony had demonstrated why these traditions endured, why they continued to matter to millions of people. The coronation connected past, present, and future, honoring history while embracing contemporary Britain's diversity and complexity. As Catherine prepared for bed, she thought about the tiara she had worn, Queen Elizabeth's tiara. Wearing it had been her way of honoring the late queen, of bringing her presence to the coronation in a tangible way. Elizabeth had worn the crown with such dignity for so long, setting an example that Catherine hoped to follow in her own role. She looked at photographs from the day on her phone, images that had already been shared millions of times on social media. She saw herself in the crimson robe and tiara, standing alongside William and their children, participating in a moment that would be remembered throughout history. It was surreal seeing herself in that context. Yet it was also her reality now. The coronation of King Charles III had been a remarkable success, a day when Britain had come together to celebrate tradition, continuity, and the promise of the future. Catherine had played her part beautifully, paying tribute to Wales through her symbolic choices while supporting her father-in-law in his moment of greatest significance as she finally lay down to sleep. Exhausted but content, Catherine felt grateful for the opportunity to be part of something larger than herself, to participate in history and to serve the country alongside the man she loved. Tomorrow would bring new duties and responsibilities, but tonight she could rest, knowing she had honored her role perfectly on one of the most important days in recent British history.